America is spending hundreds of billions of dollars on the future of AI, bigger data centers, more chips, more power. Silicon Valley had convinced investors of one simple idea: better AI requires more money. Then a Chinese company almost nobody had heard of published one number, $5.6 million. That was the reported computing cost to train one of DeepSeek's major models, a model that appeared capable of competing with some of America's best. Not $5.6 billion. And Wall Street understood the threat immediately. Because if DeepSeek could get anywhere close to America's most expensive AI models for a fraction of the cost, the problem wasn't just competition from China. It raised a much more uncomfortable question: what if America had been spending all that money? Because everyone assumed it had to. But there was one problem: the $5.6 million number didn't tell the whole story. To understand what actually happened, you have to go back a little further, not to a garage, not to a university lab, but to a hedge fund. DeepSeek wasn't founded by a group of AI researchers chasing a dream. It was built inside a Chinese quantitative trading firm, the kind of company that uses math and computing power to predict markets and make money automatically. That firm had something most AI startups don't have on day one: serious computing hardware. And a founder obsessed with efficiency. His name was Liang Wenfeng, and his background wasn't Silicon Valley hype, it was finance, a world where wasting resources isn't a bad habit. It's how you lose. When his team turned their attention to AI, they carried that same instinct with them. Don't just build something powerful, build something that doesn't waste a single dollar getting there. At the time, almost nobody outside China was paying attention. DeepSeek released research papers, then models, each one a little better, each one, reportedly, cheaper to build than what American labs were spending. For a while, the AI world barely noticed. Then came the model that changed that, and the number attached to it was so small, people assumed it had to be a mistake. Here's the number that broke the internet. DeepSeek claimed it trained one of its most advanced models for around $5.6 million in computing costs. To put that in perspective, American AI companies were, and still are, spending hundreds of millions, sometimes billions, of dollars building a single top-tier model. Not because they enjoy spending money, but because the entire industry had accepted one rule: to get smarter AI, you throw more computing power at it. More chips, more electricity, more cash. $5.6 million didn't just break that rule, it mocked it. For comparison, that's roughly what a mid-sized company might spend upgrading its office building. Not training a model that could reportedly go toe-to-toe with some of the most expensive AI systems on Earth. Within hours, the number was everywhere, on trading floors, in group chats between engineers, in emergency meetings at companies that had bet their entire strategy on the idea that scale was the only way to win. And the model wasn't just cheap. People who tested it said it actually performed well, not perfect. Not the best in the world at everything, but close enough, at a fraction of the price, that the comparison itself was terrifying to anyone who had just spent a fortune proving the opposite. If a lightly funded challenger could get this close for this little, what exactly had all that American money been buying? Here's where most headlines stopped. This is where the real story starts. $5.6 million was real, but it wasn't the whole bill. That number was the reported computing cost of that specific training run, not the full economic cost of creating DeepSeek. It didn't include the years of research before it, the salaries of the engineers, the failed experiments, or the earlier models the team had already built and learned from to get there. Think of it like reading a construction invoice and saying, "This house cost $5.6 million, while ignoring everything it took to build the construction company that made that invoice possible in the IRST place. The number on the page is real. It's just not the whole story. That doesn't mean the number was fake. It means it was incomplete. And in an industry desperate for a headline, incomplete is close enough to spread like wildfire. DeepSeek never claimed to have replaced America's entire AI industry for the price of a small office renovation. It reported the cost of training one model. That's it. But by the time anyone read the fine print, the panic had already started. And here's the twist: even with the fine print, the story didn't fall apart. because even the honest, narrower version of the number was still dramatically cheaper than what American labs were reporting for similar results. The catch didn't kill the story. It made it more precise and, oddly enough, more believable. To understand how DeepSeek got so efficient, you have to understand what it was missing a few years earlier. The United States had made a decision: block China's access to the most advanced AI chips in the world, the kind of hardware that powers America's biggest AI models, the newest, fastest, most powerful chips Nvidia makes. The idea was simple: if China can't get the best hardware, China can't build the best AI. Slow them down at the source. For a while, that strategy looked like it was working. Chinese AI companies were left using older, weaker, or specially modified chips, versions that were intentionally less powerful, designed to comply with the restrictions. On paper, that should have put them years behind. But restrictions don't just block progress. Sometimes, they redirect it. DeepSeek's engineers didn't have easy access to America's best tools. And that limitation created a powerful incentive to ask a different question than their American competitors ever had to ask. American labs were asking, how much more powerful can we make this if we spend enough? DeepSeek's engineers were asking something much harder: how much can we get out of hardware that was never supposed to be enough? That constraint helped shape how DeepSeek approached AI, where American companies could afford to be a little wasteful, throwing extra computing power at a problem instead of solving it elegantly. DeepSeek couldn't. Every wasted calculation cost them something they didn't have enough of. So their engineers rebuilt the process from the ground up, looking for shortcuts that didn't sacrifice quality, smarter ways to organize how the AI learns, smarter ways to store and process information, so the same chip could do more work without breaking a sweat. None of this was magic. It was the same principle that shows up anywhere resources are limited. A small business with a tight budget often runs leaner and smarter than a company with unlimited funding, because it has to. China had less access to America's most advanced chips. So its engineers had a different problem to solve. How do you get more from less? DeepSeek's answer was to treat every dollar and every chip like it was the last one they'd get. And when you build an entire company around that mindset, you don't just save money. You start to discover that the rules everyone else was following, spend more to get more, were never actually rules. They were just habits nobody had much reason to question. Until now. On January 27, 2025, the panic stopped being theoretical. DeepSeek's app shot to the top of download charts. Investors, who had spent years pouring money into the idea that American AI dominance was untouchable, suddenly asked themselves a terrifying question: what if the company we're not even watching is the one that changes everything? The market's answer was brutal. Nvidia, the company that makes the chips powering almost every major AI model on Earth, lost close to $600 billion in value in a single day. One of the largest one-day losses for any company in history. Other AI-related stocks fell right alongside it. The logic was simple, and it spread fast. If AI models can be built dramatically cheaper, maybe the world doesn't need as many expensive chips as everyone assumed. Maybe the entire multi-trillion-dollar bet on scale, bigger data centers, more powerful hardware, endless spending, had a crack in its foundation. Executives went on record trying to calm investors down. Some questioned DeepSeek's numbers. Some admitted, quietly, that the efficiency gains looked real, and that was the scarier possibility, because if it was true, then the race for AI dominance wasn't only about who could spend the most. It was also about who could waste the least. Once that idea was out in the open, it didn't stay contained to one company. The push toward smaller, cheaper, more open AI models didn't start with DeepSeek. Companies like Meta had been releasing open models for a while, but DeepSeek's moment poured gasoline on a trend that was already smoldering, and made efficient a word every lab suddenly needed to take seriously. In the months that followed, other AI labs, American and Chinese, leaned harder into cheaper, faster models. Prices for using AI dropped across the industry. Companies that had spent years insisting quality required massive budgets started competing on efficiency too, not just size. It's an old pattern in business. Once someone proves a cheaper way is possible, ignoring it stops being an option. What had been a race measured purely in size, who has the biggest model, the most chips, the most money, quietly became a race measured in something else too: who could do the most with the least. DeepSeek didn't win the AI war by building the smartest model on the planet. It changed what the war was even about. So does that mean scale doesn't matter anymore? No. American companies are still building bigger, more powerful models. And some of the world's most capable AI still comes from the labs spending the most money. Audio. 4.3 But DeepSeek broke something that couldn't be unbroken, the assumption that spending more was the only path forward. For years, the AI race looked like a simple equation: whoever spends the most wins. But DeepSeek broke something that couldn't be unbroken, the assumption that spending more was the only path forward. For years, the AI race looked like a simple equation: whoever spends the most wins. DeepSeek didn't disprove that scale helps. It proved that scale was never the only option. And that leaves the entire industry with a question nobody can fully answer yet. In a race this expensive, this fast, and this important, what actually wins? The companies with the deepest pockets, or the ones who figure out how to win with less? Maybe. For the first time since this race began, that's no longer obvious.